You must begin by understanding a truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Solitude is not an accident, it is a selection. When you find yourself alone, it is not because the world has rejected you, it is because you are slowly detaching from illusions that once kept you comfortable. Most people fear being alone because in silence there's no distraction from who they really are. They depend on noise, constant conversations, validation, attention to avoid confronting their own emptiness. But you, standing apart, are entering a rare territory where clarity begins. There is a pattern you will notice if you observe carefully. The moment you start thinking differently, acting independently, or refusing to follow the emotional crowd, people begin to drift away. At first, it feels like loss. You question yourself. You wonder if something is wrong with you. But in reality, something is finally right. Because most connections are not built on truth. They are built on convenience, mutual distraction, and unspoken agreements to remain average together. The second you break that agreement, you become difficult to relate to. This is where your transformation begins. Solitude forces you to see without filters. You begin to recognize how much of your past behavior was shaped by the need for approval, how many of your choices were not truly yours. And this realization is uncomfortable, even painful, but it is necessary. Because power, real power, comes only to those who can stand alone without collapsing. Understand this. People who constantly surround themselves with others are often running from something. They fear their own thoughts. They fear stillness. But when you are alone, there is nowhere to run. You either face yourself or you remain stuck. And if you choose to face yourself, something dangerous begins to develop: self-awareness. You start seeing patterns in your behavior, weaknesses in your mindset, and illusions in your beliefs. This awareness gives you an edge most people will never have. But solitude is not just about reflection. It is about reconstruction. In isolation, you are free from influence. No one is there to shape your decisions, dilute your vision, or impose their limitations on you. This is where you build yourself intentionally. You decide who you want to become without interference. While others are busy seeking attention, you are quietly developing depth. And depth always outlasts attention. There will be moments when the loneliness feels heavy, when you see others surrounded by friends, laughing, belonging, and you question your path. But what you must remember is this: belonging is often purchased at the cost of authenticity. Many people are accepted because they conform, not because they are understood. You, on the other hand, are stepping away from that transaction. You are choosing truth over comfort. And here is where the shift happens. The more comfortable you become in your solitude, the less you need anyone. And the less you need people, the more powerful your presence becomes. Because need creates weakness, but independence creates attraction. People begin to notice something different about you. You are not chasing, not seeking validation, not trying to fit in. And that makes you rare. In time, the loneliness transforms into peace, the silence becomes clarity, and the absence of others becomes the presence of yourself. You begin to enjoy your own company, trust your own thoughts, and rely on your own judgment. This is when solitude is no longer something you endure. It becomes something you protect. So if you are alone right now, do not misinterpret it as failure. Do not rush to fill the silence with meaningless noise. Stay there, observe, build, because in that space, away from distraction and illusion, you are becoming someone most people will never have the courage to be. And that is why being alone is not a weakness. It is proof that you are on the right path. The moment you stop fearing distance, you begin to understand the true nature of human connection. Most people believe closeness creates value, but in reality, constant availability reduces it. When you are always present, always responding, always giving your energy without pause, people subconsciously begin to take you for granted, not because they are evil, but because human psychology is wired to value what is scarce, not what is constantly available. And this is where your isolation starts to transform into quiet power. When you are alone, something subtle but powerful happens. You reclaim your attention. Instead of scattering your energy across multiple people, conversations, and distractions, you begin to pull it back into yourself. This shift changes everything, because attention is your most valuable currency. Wherever it goes, your life follows. Most people spend their attention on others, analyzing behaviors, seeking approval, reacting emotionally. But when you step back, when you create distance, you break this pattern. You stop reacting and you start observing. And observation is power, because the person who watches quietly understands more than the person who constantly speaks. In your silence, you begin to notice patterns in people, their insecurities, their hidden intentions, their need for validation. You start to see how predictable behavior really is. And once you see it, you are no longer controlled by it. You don't feel the same urgency to respond, to impress, or to chase. You become selective, This selectiveness is what makes you dangerous in a psychological sense, because now your presence is no longer cheap, it is measured, it is intentional. When you speak, it carries weight. When you show up, it has impact. And when you withdraw, it is noticed. This is the paradox most people never understand. Distance does not push people away, it often pulls them closer, because absence creates curiosity, and curiosity creates attraction. But this only works if your distance is rooted in strength, not insecurity. There is a difference between ignoring people because you are hurt and stepping back because you value your energy. One is reactive, the other is controlled, and people can feel that difference. When your silence comes from confidence, it unsettles others. They begin to question you. They wonder what you are thinking, what you are doing, why you are not behaving like everyone else. And in that uncertainty, your value rises. You must also understand that not everyone deserves access to you. Most people operate on emotional impulse. They will drain your time, your focus, your mental clarity without even realizing it. And if you allow everyone into your space, you dilute your own strength. Solitude teaches you boundaries without needing to explain them. You simply become less available. And that alone filters out those who were never aligned with you. There will be moments when people misinterpret your distance. They may call you cold, distant, or arrogant. But this is often a reflection of their discomfort, not your reality, because your refusal to constantly engage challenges their expectations. It disrupts the dynamic they are used to, and instead of understanding it, they label it. But you must remain unmoved by this, because the moment you start adjusting yourself to fit their comfort, you lose the very power you are building. Over time, your relationship with people changes. You no longer seek quantity, you seek quality. You become highly selective about who enters your life and even more selective about who stays. And this is where your solitude begins to pay off. Because when you do choose to connect, it is real. It is not based on need, but on alignment. And that kind of connection is rare. So understand this clearly. Your distance is not a weakness, it is a strategy. Your silence is not emptiness, it is control. And your solitude is not isolation, it is preparation. While others are losing themselves in constant interaction, you are mastering yourself in stillness. And in that mastery, you become someone people cannot easily understand, ignore, or replace. Most people fear being alone because they have been conditioned to believe that constant connection equals value. From a young age, you are subtly taught that being surrounded by people means you are liked, accepted, and important. But this is one of the greatest illusions ever sold. The truth is far more uncomfortable, and that is why so few dare to face it. When you are alone, you are stripped of external validation, and in that silence, you are forced to confront yourself without distraction. This is precisely why solitude becomes a powerful advantage rather than a weakness. When you begin to spend time alone, something shifts inside you. At first, it feels unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. Your mind searches for noise, for attention, for something to fill the emptiness. But if you resist the urge to escape, you start to notice something deeper. You begin to hear your own thoughts more clearly. You start to question the beliefs you have blindly accepted. You realize how much of your identity was shaped by the expectations of others rather than your own desires. This awareness is dangerous to the average person because it leads to independence, and independence cannot be controlled. In solitude, you develop a relationship with yourself that most people never experience. You become your own source of validation. You stop needing constant reassurance from others. This changes how you move in the world. You no longer chase attention. And ironically, this makes you more intriguing. People are naturally drawn to those who seem complete on their own. There is a quiet power in someone who does not need the approval of the crowd. It signals strength, discipline, and self-awareness. But there is another layer to this that most people ignore. When you are constantly surrounded by others, your energy is scattered. You are influenced by their opinions, their moods, their limitations. You begin to adapt yourself to fit into their expectations, often without realizing it. This weakens your sense of identity over time. Solitude, on the other hand, protects your energy. It allows you to focus, to think deeply, and to build something meaningful without interference. Many of the greatest ideas, strategies, and transformations are born in isolation, not in noise. There is also a psychological shift that occurs when you embrace being alone. You become more observant. Instead of constantly participating, you start watching. You notice patterns in human behavior. You understand motivations, insecurities, and hidden intentions. This gives you an advantage that cannot be taught in social settings. While others are busy trying to be seen, you are learning how the game actually works. And once you understand the game, you no longer feel the need to play by everyone else's rules. However, this path is not easy. Loneliness will test you. There will be moments when you question your choice, when you feel disconnected, when you wonder if you are missing out. This is where most people give up and return to the comfort of the crowd. But those who push through this phase discover something rare. They realize that loneliness is temporary, but self-mastery is permanent. They understand that the discomfort they feel is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of growth. Over time, solitude stops feeling like isolation and starts feeling like freedom. You gain control over your time, your thoughts, and your direction. You are no longer reacting to life, you are designing it. And when you eventually choose to engage with others, you do so from a position of strength, not need. You are selective, intentional, and aware of your worth. So if you find yourself alone, do not rush to escape it. Do not assume something is wrong. Instead, recognize the opportunity hidden within it. Because in a world where everyone is desperate for attention, the person who is comfortable in solitude holds a level of power that others cannot understand. And that is exactly why being alone is not a setback, but a silent step toward becoming someone truly unshakable. What truly separates you from others when you embrace solitude is not just clarity or independence, but the development of emotional control, a form of power that most people never fully attain. In a world where people are constantly reacting, constantly expressing, constantly seeking to be heard, the individual who can remain composed, silent, and internally stable becomes incredibly rare. And rarity, as you already understand, creates value. When you are constantly surrounded by people, your emotions are easily influenced. Someone's opinion can disturb you. Someone's rejection can weaken you. Someone's approval can control you. Without realizing it, your emotional state becomes dependent on external factors. This is a fragile way to live because it means your inner world is always at the mercy of others. But when you spend time alone, you begin to detach from this cycle. You start observing your emotions instead of being controlled by them. At first, this feels like resistance. You will feel the urge to react, to respond, to express. But in solitude, there is no audience, no immediate feedback, no validation. And this forces you to sit with your emotions instead of escaping them. You begin to understand where they come from. You recognize your triggers, your insecurities, your patterns. And once you understand them, they lose their power over you. This is where emotional discipline begins to form. You stop reacting instantly. You create space between stimulus and response. And in that space, you gain control. This is what makes you unpredictable to others. Because most people are easy to read. They react based on emotion. But you, having trained yourself in solitude, respond based on awareness. And this difference is subtle but powerful. People will start to notice this without fully understanding it. They may try to provoke you, test you, or get a reaction out of you. But when you remain calm, when you do not give them the emotional response they expect, it creates a psychological imbalance. They lose their sense of control over the interaction. And in that moment, the power shifts to you. But this is not about manipulation. It is about self-mastery. Because the goal is not to control others, but to stop others from controlling you. When you are emotionally stable, you cannot be easily influenced, pressured, or manipulated. You become grounded. You make decisions based on logic and long-term vision rather than temporary feelings. Solitude also teaches you patience, which is another form of power. In a fast-paced world where everyone wants instant results, instant replies, instant validation, the person who can wait, who can delay gratification, who can move at their own pace, stands apart. Patience allows you to see things others miss. It allows situations to reveal themselves fully before you act. And often, the person who waits understands more than the person who rushes. There is also a silent confidence that begins to grow within you. Not the loud, attention-seeking confidence that most people display, but a quiet certainty. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself. You don't need to win every argument, impress every person, or be involved in every situation. You choose your battles carefully, and this selectiveness makes your actions more effective. Over time, you will realize that emotional control is one of the highest forms of strength. Physical strength can be matched, intelligence can be challenged, but the ability to remain calm under pressure, to stay composed in chaos, to think clearly when others are overwhelmed, this is rare. And it is built in silence, in isolation, away from the noise of the world. So when you are alone, understand that you are not just passing time, you are training your mind. You are building a level of control that most people will never reach because they are too distracted, too reactive, too dependent on external validation to even begin the process. And once you master your emotions, you no longer belong to the chaos of the world. You move through it with control. There comes a point in your solitude where you stop seeing it as something temporary and begin to recognize it as a deliberate path, a form of strategic separation that allows you to build something most people never will, a strong, unshakable identity. Because the truth is, the majority of people do not know who they are. Their identity is a reflection of the people around them, the trends they follow, the approval they seek. They adapt constantly, shifting their personality depending on the environment, losing themselves piece by piece without even realizing it. But when you are alone, this illusion cannot survive. In solitude, there's no one to impress, no one to imitate, no one to validate your choices. And this forces you into a rare position. You must define yourself. Your thoughts are no longer influenced by the noise of others. Your decisions are no longer shaped by external expectations. You begin to ask deeper questions. What do you truly want? What do you believe in? What kind of life are you building? These are questions most people avoid because they are too distracted, too busy performing for others. But in your isolation, you are confronted with them directly. At first, this can feel overwhelming because when you remove all external influences, you realize how much of your life was built on borrowed ideas. But this realization is not a weakness. It is the beginning of transformation because now you have the opportunity to rebuild yourself from the ground up, not based on what others expect, but based on what aligns with your true nature. This process requires honesty, brutal honesty. You must be willing to see your flaws without denial, your weaknesses without excuses. You must acknowledge where you've been following the crowd, where you have been seeking approval, where you've been compromising your standards. And this is not comfortable. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding this level of self-awareness. But you in your solitude have no choice but to face it. And once you do, something powerful happens. You begin to create standards for yourself, not rules imposed by society, but principles you choose to live by. These standards become your foundation. They guide your decisions, your actions, your relationships. And unlike external validation, they are stable. They do not change based on other people's opinions. They give you consistency in a world full of uncertainty. This is where true confidence is built. Not from compliments, not from social approval, but from alignment with your own values. When you know who you are, when you are clear about what you stand for, you move differently. You do not hesitate as much. You do not second guess yourself constantly. You do not feel the need to explain yourself to everyone. Your presence becomes more grounded, more certain. People will notice this even if they cannot explain it, because most individuals operate from a place of confusion and contradiction. They say one thing and do another. They change based on who they are around. But you, having built your identity in solitude, become consistent, and consistency creates trust, respect, and influence. There's also a level of independence that comes with this. You are no longer easily swayed by trends, opinions, or social pressure. You think for yourself, you choose for yourself, and this makes you harder to control because control depends on influence, and influence weakens when someone is rooted in their own identity. But understand this path requires patience. You will not discover yourself overnight. It is a gradual process built through reflection, discipline, and time. There will be moments of doubt, moments where you question your direction. But this is part of the process because every moment of uncertainty forces you to refine your understanding of yourself even further. And while others are busy trying to fit in, trying to be accepted, trying to follow what is popular, you are quietly becoming something else entirely. Someone defined, someone grounded, someone who does not need to adjust themselves to be valued. So do not fear being alone. Do not rush to escape it. Because in that space, you are doing something most people never dare to do. You are becoming who you truly are. And once you build that identity, no external force can easily break it. There comes a moment in your life when the noise fades, when the constant chatter of expectations, opinions, and shallow connections begins to lose its grip on you. At first, it feels uncomfortable, almost unnatural. You check your phone more often than necessary. You wonder why fewer people are reaching out, and a quiet fear starts whispering that something might be wrong. But what you fail to realize in that moment is that this silence, this distance, is not a sign of loss. It is a sign of elevation. You are stepping into a space that most people are too afraid to enter. The truth is, being alone forces you into a confrontation with yourself, and most people spend their entire lives avoiding this confrontation. They surround themselves with distractions, with people who fill the void temporarily, with conversations that mean nothing but feel necessary. Why? Because sitting alone with your thoughts requires courage. It demands that you face your insecurities, your weaknesses, your unfulfilled potential. And this is exactly why your solitude is powerful. It strips away illusion. When you are alone, you begin to see clearly. You start to recognize patterns in your behavior, mistakes you kept repeating, people you allowed too close who never deserved that access. There is a sharpening of perception that only happens in isolation. It is as if the fog lifts and suddenly everything that once seemed confusing becomes obvious. You realize who truly valued you and who merely used your presence for their convenience. You understand your own habits, your own emotional triggers, your own hidden ambitions, and here is where the transformation begins. Because once you see clearly, you can act deliberately. You are no longer reacting to the world, you are shaping your place within it. While others are busy seeking validation, you are building something internal, something that cannot be shaken by external rejection or approval. This is the foundation of real power. Self-sufficiency, understand this carefully. People who cannot be alone are easy to control. They depend on attention, on acceptance, on constant reassurance. And because of this dependency, they compromise. They tolerate disrespect. They lower their standards just to avoid the discomfort of isolation. But you, by embracing solitude, are breaking free from that dependency. You are teaching yourself that your worth does not fluctuate based on who is present in your life. There is also a certain mystery that begins to surround you. When you are not constantly available, not constantly speaking, not constantly explaining yourself, people begin to wonder. Your absence creates curiosity. Your silence becomes a statement. And in a world where everyone is desperate to be seen, the one who steps back becomes the most intriguing. This is not manipulation. It is a natural shift in perception. Scarcity creates value, but beyond how others see you, the real victory lies within. In your solitude, you begin to develop discipline. You start using your time differently. You think deeper, plan better, act with more intention. You are no longer wasting energy on meaningless interactions. Instead, you are investing that energy into growth, mental, emotional, and even strategic. You are becoming someone who is not easily influenced, not easily distracted, and not easily replaced. And eventually, something remarkable happens. The loneliness you once feared transforms into peace. You no longer feel the need to fill the silence because you have become comfortable within it. You no longer chase people because you understand your own value. And when the right people do enter your life, it is no longer out of need, it is out of choice. So if you find yourself alone right now, do not interpret it as failure or rejection. See it for what it truly is, an opportunity, a rare and powerful phase where you are being shaped into someone stronger, sharper, and more independent than ever before. Because in the end, those who master solitude are the ones who master themselves. And once you master yourself, you become unstoppable.